سلام، به برنامه خوش آمدید. من هادی سحر هستم. پس از نزدیک به 6 ماه از روی کار آمدن امارت اسلامی، امریکا هنوز دارایی‌های منجمد شده افغانستان را آزاد نکرده است. امریکا در 29 فوریه سال 2020 در دوحه با طالبان توافقنامه صلح امضا کرد. حالا اما آنها را به نحو تحریم کرده است. آیا از دید امریکا امارت اسلامی شرایط به رسمیت شناخته شدن را تکمیل کرده است؟ ایالات متحده چه زمان سفارت خود در افغانستان را بازگشایی خواهد کرد؟ آیا امریکا در طولانی ترین جنگ تاریخش شکست خورده است؟ این پرسش ها و سایر پرسش های دیگر را با توماس فیست، نماینده ویژه امریکا در امور افغانستان در میان میگذارم. Mr. West, thank you so much for giving time to Van TV.
I look forward to the interview.
Let's start with the recent talks in Oslo. What were the Taliban's main commitments in Oslo meeting?
I thought the Oslo talks were an important opportunity, number one, for 14 members, courageous members of Afghan civil society to begin a dialogue that we hope will continue with the Taliban. These were representatives from the journalist community. These were former public servants, and most importantly, former women's rights or current women's rights activists, both within Afghanistan and now located outside of Afghanistan. We also had members of the private sector community, and it's certainly a focus of everyone in the international community that's interested in addressing the humanitarian crisis to see the private sector operate more efficiently and at greater scale. In terms of the commitments the Taliban made, I'll tell you one that I think is most critical, and that is that we will see the beginning of a school year, and this is consistent with the Taliban's public messaging as well, after Nowruz, and it's certainly our hope, and I think the request, the demand of all Afghans, and not just coming from the international community, that we see the enrollment of women and girls at all levels throughout the country. So that's something where I think the international community is also prepared to support the education sector as well, provided we see progress in the right direction.
Despite the international community pressure, 2 women activists have not been released yet. Did you talk about this issue to the Taliban in Oslo meeting?
Yes, absolutely. It was a top demand, again, of the women's rights activists who engaged with the Taliban there, and certainly a top demand of every envoy who was in the room together with the Taliban.
What's happening in Doha these days? Are the talks with the Taliban going to be resumed?
So right now, the United States and a number of additional foreign missions have diplomatic presences in Doha focused on Afghanistan. So the leader of our presence in Doha, his name is Ian McCary. He was the former deputy chief of mission in Kabul during the time of the Republic, and he continues to seek to advance American interests on Afghanistan issues from Doha. Again, a number of our allies also have presences in Doha, and they engage with Taliban representatives who are present in Doha as well.
The United States negotiated with the Taliban in Doha for 18 months and signed an agreement. What are the remaining issues you are discussing?
We discuss a wide range of issues. A critical, enduring priority of the United States and of many other international partners is to see the Taliban fulfill the central commitment that they made in the Doha Agreement, and that is to never allow their territory, Afghan territory, to be used by terrorists to threaten the United States or our allies. And frankly, to not allow their territory to be used by any terrorists who are looking to attack foreign territory. And so I think our dialogue now is more honest about those issues. And I think the Taliban take that commitment very seriously. Even since August 15th, we have seen them commit resolutely and publicly on many occasions to fulfilling that commitment. So that is one issue that we discuss in detail. Another issue we discuss in detail is the rights of women, girls, and minorities across Afghanistan. And here I would say this is not pressure from the international community principally. We are seeking to reflect the views of Afghans inside the country. I think Afghans inside the country do want to see a new political process emerge where there is genuine consultation with Afghans across the country as an interim government contemplates moving to a permanent status. It is not for the United States or any other country to even to suggest a specific form for that process. That is an issue for Afghans to decide for themselves. But I think we do want to see a process of genuine consultation. We raise other issues as well. We raise concerns about reprisal killings. I think the policy that the Taliban have announced of general amnesty is a good policy. But we want to see that when there are people who violate that policy, there are perpetrators of reprisal killings, we want to see them brought to justice. And I think that's a demand of Afghans as well.
Do you think that the Taliban has been committed to the Doha Agreement? Has the Taliban broken ties with Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups?
The central commitment within the Doha Agreement related to terrorism was that the Taliban would never allow Afghan territory to be used by foreign terrorists to threaten the United States or its allies. Do I think the Taliban are committed to that goal? Yes, I do. I think that the Taliban have no interest in inviting international engagement on a military basis in Afghanistan ever again. They understand that we never want to see a threat emerge from Afghan soil again. And so, yes, I think they are serious about that commitment. That is not to say that we aren't concerned about continuing ties to terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda and other groups. But at the same time, we have common enemies. So ISIS-K, for instance, is definitely a common enemy. We want to see Afghan territory rid of ISIS-K. We want to be sure that none of ISIS-K's external plotters are allowed to plot and threaten the United States or its allies. And I think that is a goal of the Taliban as well.
Many, including Ashraf Ghani, believe that the Doha Agreement led to the collapse of the government in Afghanistan. What is your opinion in this regard? I
think the answer to the question of why Afghan military forces eventually lost so much territory in so many cities is an extremely complicated question to answer. I am not a military expert. That is not my job. I am a diplomat. And so I wouldn't try to answer it in great detail. But I think there were questions about the sustainability of the Air Force that were critical and possibly contributed to some of the territorial losses underway. And I think the Doha process was a process where, in my participation in that process, I was not a part of the last American administration, but in my participation since January, we tried very hard to make absolutely sure that the entire republic, from the leaders of the Peace Council, led by Dr. Abdullah, to the leaders at the palace, led by President Ghani and others, that they were briefed at every step of the way, that they had knowledge of what we were undertaking. And to be honest, I mean, my view is that there was difficulty and fault on both sides, on the Taliban side, as well as on the Republic side, as well as on the international community side, for the failure of the Doha process to produce a negotiated settlement. I think that's certainly what we wanted to see, but I think there was fault all around.
After 20 years in Afghanistan, spending billions of dollars and many sacrifices, the United States left behind an Afghanistan that has nothing. I mean, all the achievement and foundations of the last 2 decades in Afghanistan were destroyed. Did the United States fail in Afghanistan?
I don't agree with your question. I don't believe we left behind nothing. I believe that what we see is the desire of the Afghan population for a genuine peace, a lasting peace, a representative government. And you have millions across the country who were educated, who have achieved health standards that were unthinkable in the year 2001. We improved, together with enormous investments from our allies, the infrastructure of the country, all across the country. And I can give you just one example. I think we revolutionized the economy in Kunar province because prior to our intervention, it took many, many hours to get from Asadabad or Chagasarai down to Jalalabad. And because of the road we put together, we minimized that time much shorter, making the transit of goods and services possible between them. So I disagree with your contention that we left nothing behind. I think we left a far more educated populace behind, a populace that was exposed to representative government, a populace that wants women and girls to be educated and to participate in society, and a populace that is healthy and much healthier than it was before. And I think those are all achievements worth safeguarding and worth working for.
When the United States will reopen its embassy in Afghanistan?
I tell you, I miss being in Afghanistan very much. I hope to return at some point as I take up my responsibilities. At the moment, we are not prepared to reopen our embassy. I think we are evaluating the security situation carefully. But certainly, I hope to be able to return in this job. And there is no substitute in this position for sitting down and speaking with Afghans from across the country, from cities, from villages, those who are professors, those who are farmers, those who are teachers. And in this job, unfortunately, from afar, I don't get to meet Afghans on a daily basis, and I hope to be able to do so in this job.
The international community, including the United States, have always called for an inclusive government in Afghanistan, but never mention elections and democracy anymore. Is democracy no longer an option to Afghanistan's problem?
That is not for us to decide. I think that is for Afghans to decide. If Afghans get together and they determine that a democratic process and elections is the right way ahead, then certainly as a democracy ourselves, we would support that path strongly. I think the benefit to a democratic process is that a system can change over time and reflect the will of its people. But it is also true that the history of elections in Afghanistan is a complicated history over the past 20 years. I think we saw multiple elections that were not as fair as they could be. And so we would want, as a process we're unfolding, to see an electoral process that was fair and representative as well, if that is, again, what Afghans choose.
Mr. West, the U.S. Department of State asked the Islamic Emirate to release Mark Fredericks, who was taken hostage 2 years ago in Afghanistan. Quote, "The U.S. has raised Mark's case in every meeting with the Taliban, and we have been clear that the legitimacy the Taliban seek is impossible to consider while they hold a U.S. citizen hostage. Now, is his release a condition for the Taliban's recognition in Afghanistan?"
I think you probably saw a statement from the President of the United States as well as from the Secretary of State on the occasion of the 2-year anniversary of Mark Fredericks' capture at the hands of the Taliban. And what I would say is that the Taliban seek legitimacy as a state. States that are seeking to be treated as responsible actors on the world stage, they do not take hostages, they do not hold hostages. And so, yes, in return for steps toward normalization, we want to bring Mark Fredericks home. He is an innocent civilian, and it is unacceptable that he remains in detention.
Does the National Resistance Front have a political office in Washington?
Not that I'm aware of. So essentially, we have a process whereby foreign entities who are wishing to influence the United States government can register. It's a self-initiated process. And so there may have been individuals with the National Resistance Front who went onto a computer and registered the organization. But I'm not familiar with whether they have an office operating in the United States or not.
Mr. West, is ISIS a threat to Afghanistan?
Unfortunately, I think the answer is yes. we saw a horrific spate of attacks across the country in Kandahar and Jalalabad, in the north as well, in Kunduz. And so I think we want to be sure that Afghans come together, and anybody they see who is trying to support ISIS, they convince them not to support them, because continued terrorism and continued war in Afghanistan is not the answer. And so we want to see their defeat.
Are the Taliban able to contain ISIS in Afghanistan?
So far, I think we have seen an aggressive and a bold strategy by the Taliban, involving operations, involving losses on their side to contain ISIS. I have to say, we have concerns about collective punishment and about widespread killings as part of that campaign, particularly in Nangarhar and Kunar. We want to be sure that that kind of activity does not produce greater recruitment. But the fact is, we have seen some major gains against ISIS over the past several months.
Mr. West, are you worried about China and Russia's presence in Afghanistan? Some in the United States believe that China will fill the American vacuum in Afghanistan.
All countries in the region have a role to play and interest to protect in Afghanistan. And so we want for Afghanistan to have good relations with Russia. We want for Afghanistan to have good relations with China, as well as with Iran and India and Pakistan and the Central Asian states as well. It is not for the United States to pick and choose who Afghanistan has good relations with. And it is a complicated neighborhood with a long history. And so we hope that Afghanistan has good relations with its neighbors and the powers nearby.
Mr. West, has the United States reached to an agreement with Afghanistan's neighbors regarding the military bases?
As President Biden has made clear, when it comes to terrorism, we will work with the countries in the region. We will reorganize our capabilities to remain unwavering in our commitment to not allow terrorists to ever threaten the United States or its allies again.
When do you recognize the Islamic Emirate?
We don't have a calendar where we're thinking of a specific time when we are considering a full recognition of the Taliban. What I would say is that my bosses have told me to continue diplomacy with the Taliban in order to protect American interests. When it comes to terrorism, when it comes to women and girls and the gains that we made over 20 years. Also, frankly, when it comes to the humanitarian crisis unfolding, that is taking up more of our time in the United States than any other subject. There is no easy answer to why the economy has collapsed so widely. There is a banking crisis underway. We have released 6 general licenses, as well as championed a UN Security Council resolution. We have provided what we call comfort, in a way, for a UK-based corporation to ship hundreds of millions of dollars into the country to support relief organizations as they stand up. But frankly, some of this is not readily solvable, because when the Taliban took over on the 15th, all foreign donors, not just the United States, but Germany, Japan, the UK, others, they withdrew from the country. And in a country that whose economy was 40% dependent on foreign aid, and 75% of its public expenditures came from foreign donors, this is a situation that is difficult to fully address. But Afghans are unfortunately suffering in this situation, and it's not their fault. This is not their fault. And so I think it's incumbent on the international community to do all we can to address the humanitarian crisis, and frankly, to find an environment in which the banking sector can heal itself, and we can see Afghans have ready access to cash as well, so that they can buy what they need to feed their families, to get medicine for their families as well.
As closing, Mr. West, has the Taliban met the conditions for recognition?
No.
Thomas West, U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan, thank you for talking to Van TV.
Thank you very much. Babana Khoda.
بینندگان عزیز، تشکر از شما هم که تا این دم با ما بودید. وقتتان خوش.